Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first ever episode of the Adored Tech podcast. I am Donnie from Adored TV, and this is my co host, Alex. You probably know him from the various amount of videos he's done on the channel.
Some of you like them, some of you
Most of you hate them, let's be honest.
I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
To answer whoever just left a comment in the chat asking if Jim has been assassinated. Okay, he corrected himself. No, he is not. He's just currently dealing with some personal issues, but yeah, that's sort of the what's going on there. I have been contracted by Noctua to wear the sweater. No.
Fucking chill. Fucking chill. I told you not to tell anybody that. No.
No, they just sent me the sweater with fans that I'm supposed to do some coverage on. That's really it. It's a really nice sweater, and it's really cold here in the Northeast in January. So, By the way, do you guys like my chairs? They came with the place.
That's a lot of chairs. A lot of chairs and only one ass.
No, Jim has not been assassinated and replaced by a robot. I would imagine if a robot replaced any of us, they would be more productive. That's how robots work, right?
I don't know. So you wanted to talk about some of the CES announcements from AMD and Intel to start with. So if you have yours pulled up, I will share your screen.
Yeah. If you could pull that up, Jamie.
Jamie? Oh, that's a Joe Rogan reference. I'm not your Jamie, all right? I'm Joe, if anything.
All right, so I'm the ape, I guess, that everybody always talks about. No? All right. Anyways. Yeah, so, I mean, the big thing that I guess everybody was really excited for, I know I was, is the Ryzen 5000 3D NAND stuff. Or Vcache, or whatever sort of name that they want to use for it. The big thing that we see here is, unfortunately, there was no 8 or 12, 12 or 16 core parts. There was just the 8 core part. And apparently AMD addressed this and said that
What?
What's happening in the comments?
I mean, you're getting roasted.
I'm sure I am.
It's not NAND, but that's besides the point.
Listen, you guys know what I'm talking about, all right? Maybe you don't actually, and that's the problem. And I'm making people, confused. But yeah, this was so much better in the other cut that we was not live.
What? There was no other cut. Don't tell them that we messed up.
You're just leaving me out here to dry, man.
What do you want me to do?
Yeah, I mean, so everybody was looking forward to 12 and 16 core parts with the 3D V cache. I'm sorry, excuse me, X cache. But unfortunately, we only got the one single 8 core part. AMD says that this is to get as many chips in as many people's hands as possible, because the smile is freaking me out here. I'm
just like listening to you, and you're just stopping.
Listen, it's been a while, all right.
You have to excuse Alex. He's contracted the vid, so he's having a lot of brain fog tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the reasoning that AMD had apparently was that it would be able to get more CPUs out to market. If they had to split this up into 12 and 16 core parts, there would be less chips to go around. And this is really focused at gamers, and gamers, I mean, we've said this a million times, they don't need 12 and 16 core parts. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it about the 5800X 3D.
I'm a little bit disappointed with the announcement for the 5800X 3D,
Mhm.
mostly because, one, they're not talking about pricing. I would like to know, is it going to be more expensive than the current 5800X, or is that coming down a tier, whereas the 5800X will replace it in price?
Well,
I realize that this chip, the entire reason it exists is so they can be able to, compete with Intel again in the gaming space and take back the we're number one gamer chip thing, which
I
doesn't
mean,
really matter.
they say apparently they are, and they're going to be, what is it? 12% faster than Intel. I mean, yeah, you're going to lose, what is it? About 400 megahertz of clock speed on the base and about 200 megahertz on the single core boost. But by tripling the cache, if you're looking at it, it's going to be a net positive. I mean, we should assume in most of these gaming scenarios.
Chips and Cheese said there was also an interview where Robert Halleck said that VCAche spread across two chiplets could be detrimental to performance as it is currently laid out. I mean, that would make sense of why they've never demoed it on more than one CCD.
Yeah,
Consumer
consumer
workloads, I should
workloads.
add.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the question
Well,
is then will they be doing more 3D Vcache chips in the future when we're talking about Zen 4 and the Ryzen 7000 series, I think it's going to be called, or is this something that's kind of one off or more enterprise focused?
Yeah. To answer Was Machine's question, the reason why you get a regression in clock speed is because by tripling the amount of cache, it does draw a little bit more power. Probably talking about another couple watts, 5, 10 watts maybe, and that would be detrimental to your maximum clock speed or your all core clock speed. And
I
you still need to be within that 105 power, 105 watt power
I don't
envelope.
I don't know. I actually think it might have more to do with the thermals, if anything, because actually he brought that up in the chat. Because the 5800X is one of the hotter running chips already from the 5000 series lineup.
I mean, that's a
And
fair
when you
point.
have a package laid on top of it, that's gonna affect thermal performance more than anything. I mean, I don't think it should power draw
Well,
should be that important when the 5950X has double the cores. Like,
well, they also have the best cores possible. Like that's just those are binned differently. The power thing is true, but cache doesn't really get that much that hot. It would increase the thermals for sure, but how much I don't really
so it's not
know.
really that the cache is. I would imagine it's not really that the cache itself gets hot, but the way it's laid on top of like the packaging
Mhm.
is going to affect the how well you can cool the underlying CPU core complex itself.
I suppose so. I mean, I usually run my 5800X in sort of like a more eco mode. It's like I think it's like a 90 watt mode that I run it on, where I found the sweet spot in performance. But yeah, if we were to do that with a dual chiplet thing, I could see that being a bigger problem with the latency issues.
It's something I definitely hope that they sort out by the time Zen 4 is coming, because if I would personally love to see higher core counts with the increased cache the way they're doing now with this.
Mm-hmm. What else did we want to cover after this, Donnie?
Well, I think you
I mean,
wanted to go over the.
there's the mobile stuff, I guess.
Yeah, you can go over that.
Yeah. So this is basically going to be Zen 3 Plus. Apparently, it's called Rembrandt. And you're going to see these processors on 6 nanometer, which I think is more like 7 plus plus for the people watching. I think it's really close to the 7 nanometer.
But the 6 nanometer node, it is based on their
Yeah,
7 nanometer process. It's not a new node. It's a refinement
yeah. I mean,
optimization node or whatever you
from
call it.
from what I got from this, and we don't really have any concrete numbers or any real testing, but it's supposed to be even better for for what is it, ultra books, and it's going to improve power per watt even better, performance per watt even better than the other ones, and it should, excuse me, take over the lead from Intel again. I mean, you're going to get a whole lot more cache apparently uh, on the APUs, which is going to help graphics performance. But yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be even better. I don't know about you. I'm not really interested in the performance of the mobile stuff. I just feel like it's good that it's there. I think this will be good for AMD in terms of market share and sales numbers. But in the actual like sort of nitty gritty, I don't have a whole lot of thoughts here. What about you?
Sorry, what was that? I was reading something. I was disappointed about, or I was reading something that someone said they were disappointed about something, and I was,
Oh,
uh,
no, I was going to say, like, I think the mobile stuff is sort of interesting to look at, but at the end of the day, I kind of don't care, personally, because I don't really do any heavy workloads on laptops. I think it's interesting. I think it's good for AMD's market share, and I think I care in that sort of perspective, and I think this will help them with that. But I mean, that's pretty much it. The fact that AMD, as it says right here, is expecting 200 plus premium systems in the market with their mobile in 2022 is a big deal. I think that's more of the stuff you should look at.
yeah, I mean, as far as Rembrandt goes, what excites me about it is just simply the fact that we'll start seeing more and more notebooks that are using AMD hardware but are actually high end. Plus, I mean, it's finally getting RDNA, which is a
Yes,
big plus.
yes.
So I'm looking forward to seeing what sort of laptops are using Rembrandt, what kind of form factors it enables, and just how much they're able to compete with Intel
Mhm.
in that space. Because I mean, mobile has historically been dominated by Intel.
I mean, I think with the past couple generations, I want to say like the past two or three, AMD's done a fantastic job with the mobile market, and they're really catching up in terms of sales and sort of brand recognition.
Yeah.
Before, it was kind of like a why do you have an AMD laptop? To now sort of, oh, they're that's Ryzen, which helps a lot with the sort of like average consumer viewpoint.
Hmm.
Yeah, we got some interesting questions here. I see there's one about getting an X570 motherboard. I mean, if you want to, honestly, if you have, um, excuse me, if you have, a perfectly fine B450 or X370 or what have you motherboard that you're happy with, and you're just going to upgrade to 5000, maybe this 5800X, um, I think it's fine, especially because apparently ASRock is supporting X370 motherboards now.
Oh,
Up,
messed up that.
you were
Yeah,
trying to
actually,
you were trying to get it in there.
yeah, I messed that up, but let's
It's
pretend
okay.
that didn't happen. And here's the article.
If you guys just pretend that weird moment I had a few minutes ago didn't happen, that'd be cool too.
Yeah, so apparently ASRock releases first official X370 BIOS with Ryzen 5000 Vermeer support. So this is really interesting because, I mean, before AMD said that they couldn't support Ryzen 5000 with the 300 series chipsets. However, it seems like they are kind of rolling that back and actually allowing motherboard manufacturers to support Ryzen 5000 on both X370 and B350. I think there's even some A320 motherboards out there that support it. It seems like this is the first. ASRock was the first to the party, but there should be others.
Mhm.
I'd be interested to see like just how well they run on X370 and if there's any issues or anything like that. Obviously, you're not going to get PCIe 4.0, but I mean, whatever. I also definitely think that them deciding to do this now was kind of strategic on their part, because when you have a lot of owners of first generation and second generation Ryzen who have these 300 series motherboards that are looking to upgrade now, if they had to buy a new motherboard anyway, then do they buy Ryzen 5000 and an X570 or a B550 motherboard and not have an upgrade path after that, because obviously AM5 is coming around next?
Mhm.
Or do they buy an Alder Lake CPU and Z690, or the whatever the other one is, B660 or something? And then at least the upgrade there is that you get whatever the next generation Intel part will still support that socket. I mean, because Intel has historically supported at least 2 processor generations per chipset,
and they will for this one too. They've already stated that.
Yeah. So I mean, at least here, if you're an existing Ryzen owner, no matter whether you're on 300 series, 400 series, or whatever, you can upgrade to Ryzen 5000, even that new shiny 5800 X3D. That's such a weird name, by the way.
It's so uncomfortable to say.
And that, at least lures people away from buying Intel who are already AMD customers. You don't want to give an AMD customer a reason to go Intel. So this was a good move on their part.
Yeah, I mean, Nathan brings up that the 12400 being $100 cheaper and having an IGP, AMD has no right to sell it for what they are. I mean, they probably won't be selling it for what they are right now. It's important to understand, guys, for a long time, AMD, no matter what they price these things at, they could not keep them in stock. I think also when you talked about pricing, about the new 5800X with the new cache, the X3, RDNA 2 unlocked, whatever. They can't price it at $500. I really don't think they can, especially because you've seen that the what is it, the 449 price that they originally came out at. I mean, you've been seeing these things sell for $350, $375 for months because they have them, in stock. With the 6-core, people are still buying them. So the second that people start buying Intel chips and these things start sitting on shelves, you'll start to see them get blown out. Let's see. And I don't know about that, Tweedle. AMD is not selling at a loss at all on these parts. The cost to manufacture them is very low. And I mean, I think we've talked about this before, Donnie, that the price on a 5600X has to be under $100 to package the thing, get the chips together and ship the thing out, even with a cooler if there's one included. Oh, Intel is. I doubt that. I don't know. The CPU market has good margins. I know AMD is able to sell these things for a lot lower, but Doughboy, they don't have to. They don't have to worry about the budget market. You don't have to serve the budget market when the enthusiast market is selling literally everything you make. This sort of, I mean, these are companies. They're not going to care about loyalty or, you know, the little guys or whatever, especially as these companies get larger. They're multinational corporations. What was the I don't think AMD is not hitting their DIY sales CPU sales targets. I really don't. I think that they've been selling fantastically, and maybe now they're starting to have a bit of extra
I
stock,
mean,
but
I could imagine there's definitely going to be a slow for everyone right now, considering that there's not a lot of excitement around the DIY space because
yep.
of the lack of graphics cards. But I mean, AMD definitely sold a lot of Ryzen 5000 series processors from launch up until, you know, not very long ago. I think when you look at the fact that they're readily available now, that probably means that sales are definitely slowing down. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good reason to enable support on older motherboards to try to jumpstart those sales again.
I mean, I,
I mean,
as long as they're going to be selling these processors at that number, they're going to continue to sell them at that number. So when they start getting a lack of sales, and the same thing with graphics cards, as long as these things keep flying off the shelves, you're going to see these prices. Why sell CPUs at all if you can gauge the graphics market? Because you
gouge.
actually make way. Oh,
He
gouge.
meant
Okay.
gouge.
Yeah. Thought I read that as an A. Yeah, I mean, because you make way more money per CPU that you sell. This is really important for you guys to understand, and I think we've talked about this before, but I mean, the profit margins AMD makes on selling a GPU is not that high because they have to sell a die to Asus, XFX, whoever,
MSI, whatever.
and then they have to spend a ton of cost on everything else. I mean, you know, we're expecting that they make somewhere between 60 and maybe like $100 per die, right, Donnie? Profit? Something
Um,
like that. And on the cheaper ones, it's probably even lower.
I mean, it depends on the size of the die, but they're definitely, I mean, if they're still maintaining a 40% margin like they talked about before,
Mm-hmm.
like if whatever they're selling that die for, I mean, on something like a 6600 XT, they're probably only making like 30 or $40. And as far that's AMD's, and all of the actual price of the graphics card is mostly in everything else.
Well, so Tweedle says NVIDIA makes like 600. Um, so if AMD sells you a GPU themselves, or NVIDIA sells a Founders Edition card that if they're handling most of the manufacturing costs, then yeah. If I remember right though, Donnie, NVIDIA doesn't actually do the manufacturing. Don't they usually contract somebody else out, or maybe they do
Yeah,
now with the?
there's somebody else doing it. I don't know exactly who. I mean, and nobody does the manufacturing themselves. They use some sort of OEM for that. Who it is depends on the product and at the time. But like as far as the main difference between Nvidia and AMD when it comes to graphics sales, though, I mean, forget about Founders Edition cards because there's not a lot of them. Is that NVIDIA, at least on the higher end models, will also sell the memory to their add-in board partners because that's the whole point of GDDR6X is that NVIDIA has an exclusive contract with Micron for that, and they buy all the memory from them and then sell it to the add-in board partners with the die, the GPU die itself. So there's going to be more room for profit there because there's more actual things they're selling. But again, the right now the single most expensive part of any GPU that you buy is going to be the memory. So AMD makes a lot more money on CPU sales than they do on GPU sales because
Yes.
there is no middleman. There is no add-in board partner. They package those things. They buy them directly from TSMC or whatever the dies itself. They have contract. And so if it's $100 to make a CPU that they sell for $700, that is all profit.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand if you think of a GPU, think of it as a whole system. Um, when you buy a CPU, you just buy a CPU. You don't buy the motherboard, you don't buy the RAM, you don't buy anything else. You just buy the chip. You don't just buy a graphics chip, you buy a whole card. You buy the substrate, the cooling, everything else that goes on there.
And yeah, so moving on to more announcements that came out of CES. As far as NVIDIA goes, they announced two graphics cards, the RTX 3050, which is a 200 and I think they said the MSRP is $249.
Yep.
This is their entry-level GPU into RTX. That features 2,560 CUDA cores. I have the specs pulled up here. Honestly, and it has 8 gigs of VRAM. Honestly, like, I don't see these ever selling for the price that the MSRP that they're quoting here.
What is it?
Like,
$250?
Their MSRP is 250, but I mean they're obviously going to sell for much higher than that. In fact, I think I have an article here that says that the RTX 3050 sold out instantly in Japan for $400.
I don't think it's surprising to anybody who's been paying attention to this.
Yeah, so I don't expect you to ever see the $249 MSRP at launch here in the US or anywhere for that matter. I think add-in board partners are going to do what they've done so far and increase the price.
Well,
and
I think what you'll see is I think you'll see a few token cards that have that $250 price point that they ship maybe 100 of them from some AIBs. And then they mostly make the more expensive ones that are $350, $400. EVGA has probably been the best company about this so far, where they'll actually make some of the cheaper cards and they won't gouge as hard. So, I mean, and it kind of depends on the cost, Liam. If they can get cards for what MSRP is supposed to be, they're probably good miner cards, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
I hate to agree with Doughboy here in the chat by saying MSRP is dead from here on out. As long as there's this insane demand that it's look, miners are definitely a thing, and they definitely are making this bad. But explain to me why people were giving $700 to $800 on eBay for DDR5 RAM that was triple the MSRP. I think there's a lot of people too who are willing to pay out the nose for the latest and greatest thing because they can't buy them easily. Tank parts oversupply would be nice, but no one is going to be the one who oversupplies. Nobody wants to be the one who oversupplies. Look, what we would love is to have every graphics card be $1, but NVIDIA would not like that. NVIDIA would love us to pay $1 million for every graphics card that they sell. So it's kind of like,
I mean, every graphics card being $1 obviously is you're exaggerating a bit, but I mean, the moment they go down to prices that are so low,
you would turn down $1 3090.
No, but I mean,
okay.
the point I'm making though is that at some point though, if the demand isn't there, they'll just make less cards.
Yeah,
like that's just the way it is. So as long as the demand is high, and it has been high, people are willing to pay obscene amounts of money for a graphics card. I mean, I think one of the worst selling cards of this generation right now is probably the 6700 XT, and that still readily sells for $1,000. The 3060 Ti goes for $800-900 easily. People are buying them. If you stop buying them, then eventually the prices will lower.
I'm a part of the problem because I did give $1,200 for my 6800 XT. I understand.
I did the same.
So, I mean, Gunny says that demand will keep persisting if people can make money with it, and I agree with that. I I just don't think things will go back to normal if the miners go away. I think a lot of people have gotten used to these prices. Sort of people who aren't really tech enthusiasts, people who don't watch videos all the time, check out a lot of reviews. They're gamers who, you know, post their rigs on TikTok kind of people. There's been an influx of a lot of people who are not incredibly tech savvy into the PC gaming scene the past 3, maybe 4 years. I think since the pandemic, it's been really, I think it really overshot it because a lot of people were just at home all the time.
Yeah, I mean, just the popularity of Twitch and Twitch streamers that are the amount of people who watch Twitch streamers, and I mean, a lot of them game on PC, just should show you just how many people are getting into this space.
Yes.
And as far as the market goes, like you have millennials who have, uh, on average, a lot of disposable income compared to other generations, and they are willing to spend money on premium products, and that's why you've seen an increase in not just the price of graphics cards, but I mean, a few years ago, it was unheard of to hear that, you know, one of the most popular mice, gaming mice, was like $80 to $100. But there are all sorts of mice that are in that price range. People spend ridiculous amounts of money on things like lights for their streaming setup. And they're not professional streamers. They don't make $1 of a streaming, but they still spend money on, you know. My wife bought me these Nano Leaf things for my birthday. This was $200 for 7 LED panels. I was ridiculously like, I appreciated the gift, but I was also upset about how much money they were for LED lights.
So, I mean, Steve's made a point where there's a ton of buy now, pay later sort of stuff.
Oh
where
yeah,
you
the
can
credit
justify
industry
paying
is
it.
definitely a part of it.
Yeah, no, the amount of online credit that is just always there offering this stuff to you, it makes it really easy to just go, I'll just pay for it later, I guess. I can't get a RAM anyways. I guess I'll just pay through the nose.
Sweetle, I actually don't know what video you're talking about. So I guess I just so happened to be I mentioned an expensive mouse, and they probably did a video about one. But I mean, it doesn't surprise me because that's just the world we live in.
Eton, the question about the HDD price, I think things will normalize, but I think things will normalize to the new normal of MSRPs where a top tier graphics card is like $1,000 and people are spending 500 to 700 for the high tier stuff. I think that's going to be the new normal. I think a $200 entry price for what used to be $100 is probably going to be what we're going to be getting used to. Unfortunately, I think that's just kind of where we're going to be going. And Shai made a point about the Bitcoin crash. Yes, but there also wasn't as many new people who are getting used to these prices. I think it's important to understand that even if every, I don't know how many people are watching right now, but I assume it's at least,
It's
a decent amount of people. Okay. So if the 70 people listening right now and the 100,000 subscribers of Adored TV all decided we will not buy a GPU unless it's priced at, $150 for something that's the level of like the 580, they'll just sell the GPUs to everybody else that are willing to pay $400 for them. Yeah. And we just won't get anything. That's just kind of what's going to happen. We are a minority, unfortunately. And yeah, the creators and the sort of hype people on the internet have sort of just told people, yeah, you need to spend a lot of money on this stuff, and they just sort of accept it. That's the kind of why I don't get really hammered on the pricing and everything else, because there's only so much I can do. I'm not a major influencer to that degree.
More onto the GPU topic. NVIDIA asks board partners to halt GeForce RTX 3090 Ti production, citing BIOS and hardware issues. Now, I believe this is not confirmed. This is still a kind of a rumor thing, but it seems like a fairly credible rumor at this point. This is one of the other graphics cards that NVIDIA announced at CES. we don't know any more information about why they're halting it. BIOS and hardware issues seems very vague to me. Like that could be as something as simple as like when they say hardware issues, they probably don't mean board issues because obviously every board is different. Not every board partner was using the same board design. So I'd imagine if there is a more crucial issue with this thing, I like when are they going to get it out? It probably will release sooner rather than later, but I really hate that they are releasing this product to begin with. This is with the recent launch of the RTX 3080 12 gig, because that's a thing. We now have a total of 5 announced SKUs using essentially the same underlying GPU die. Yes, they're different bins, but it is still based on the same silicon. And in a normal world, this would have been skewed out to 2 different SKUs at most. And anything that would have been a 3090 Ti would just be binned down to a 3090 and sold as a 3090 because that's already a $1,500 graphics card. And, they would have sold everything else as a 3080, which, had a very reasonable MSRP of, I think, around $700. So, yeah, I mean, I agree that is NVIDIA shifting the GA102 SKUs up in price, but it is so infuriating that they would even feel the need to do this when prices were already high. There wasn't a single 3080 selling for $700 anymore.
I mean, I think NVIDIA is really trying to see how far they can go before people stop buying GPUs. I think that's really what they want to do. I think they want to really test the waters.
It's getting quite ridiculous, if you ask me. I mean, the amount of different SKUs they're coming out with very low availability to begin with are, maybe they have high availability, but the demand is so high that they're selling out anyway. And they're being priced way above what even the 3090 Ti will not sell for MSRP, whatever that MSRP is. I think they said it's supposed to still be the same $1,500, but it's not. I mean,
no, I could see $5,000. People in the chat are saying $4,000. I could see $5,000 right now on eBay. I could see it right there, $5,000. I could see ASUS in MSI with their triple fan, XX overclock unlocked, selling for like $4,000, $3,500. And it's going to go out of stock immediately because that's just the world that we're in right now.
Yeah. I mean,
so I think
the way you are meant to be played.
Steve's said something about NVIDIA making this, I guess is tongue in cheek, about the fact that Steve from Hardware Unbox uses a 6900 XT for 1080p benchmarks is to make him switch back. I don't think this is going to close the gap in 1080p. I think NVIDIA is just not as fast in 1080p. They have weird bottleneck issues. They're not built to go 400 FPS at 1080p.
I mean, do you really need 400 FPS at 1080p?
I mean, if you're an esports gamer guy, which
there are 360 hertz monitors, and I believe they're releasing ones that are in the 400 and
Tweedle, my car almost cost as much as my graphics card. My system costs more than my car. So yeah, I mean, that's the world we're in.
Again, with more graphics card stuff.
Samsung increased prices, TMC increased price, and AMD and NVIDIA did not increase the price. This is disinformation. Wholesale increases the price, the cost offset. Yeah, I mean, again, like the numbers that you're seeing at retail are not AMD and NVIDIA. The numbers you're seeing at retail are a combination of the AIBs, the retailers, and the wholesalers. But the MSRP that's being sold, that number is a number that exists. I mean, it's there, say what you want, but NVIDIA was not selling graphics cards that started at $1,500 2 years ago, 3 years ago. This is a new thing.
And just so we're spreading the love, NVIDIA wasn't the only one to announce graphics cards at CES. AMD announced the RX 6500 XT, which is a $199 GPU that will never be sold for $199, but is their latest, achievement in the RX 580 replacement space. Unfortunately, while they are claiming it is up to, I think, 59% faster than a GTX 1650, that's the non-super variant. The RX 570 was already still faster than the GTX 1650. And the other thing that's wrong with the 6500 XT is, as we can see here, it does not have any hardware encoding support. It apparently,
which is just
yeah,
okay.
I don't know why it doesn't have it, but I do know that they clearly list that it doesn't have it here. So that is a major feature problem, because anybody who buys a graphics card nowadays expects to be able to encode video with it, so you can do things like stream without taxing your CPU or whatever. And this being a more budget focused graphics card, you'd imagine that people who buy it will have weaker systems where they'd be able to benefit from that. To make things worse, apparently video cards reported that the 6500 XT is limited to just PCIe 4.0 X4 interface. Now, on the surface, this is not a big deal since the GPU itself is not going to be very powerful. But the problem is that if you don't have a PCIe 4.0 enabled CPU and motherboard, then you are running at effectively PCIe. You're running at PCIe 3.0 X4, which is effectively what is that? 8 gigabytes per second bandwidth. That's going to be an issue. Like, I don't see this thing performing very well in a variety of situations. I think in a lot of situations it'll be just fine if you're just playing at 1080p. But there are going to be issues with this card in more memory demanding games because it is so stripped down in bare bones. And to make things worse,
the 64-bit thing, just I know it has the Infinity Cache stuff in there, Donnie, but it's a weird number to look at for a gaming graphics card. 64-bit bus. Wow.
Again, 64-bit bus wouldn't bother me as much, considering it has the cache, like you said. If it had at least an X8 interface. X4 is just ridiculous. There are theories, I think they talked about in the chat, that this is a repurposed laptop GPU that they weren't intending to release in the desktop space. That's probably true.
Makes sense.
But it's a bad look. And then to make things worse, the early look at the pricing, even though it has a $199 MSRP, it looks like coming out of Europe, we're looking at prices of 299 euro, which is around $338. Obviously, that includes VAT, but with the US tariffs, it's not like that's going to make a difference. So we're looking at prices as high as $374 from some Asus models, too. Like, that's ridiculous.
You'll notice something though, guys, if you pay attention. There are certain brands that are making way more on their cards than other people, and there's some companies that are a lot closer to MSRP. So I think some of this is legitimately just gouging from some companies, although maybe I could make an argument for some of them, because some of the more expensive and premium components are very I've also gone up tenfold in price in some situations. I actually had a video I was doing on this a long time ago that I just shelved, where I sort of explained the cost of all of the components on a graphics card. And I think it was the 6600 XT we were talking about originally, Donnie, that me and you talked about as I was working on that video. The MSRP on that card wasn't that far off of normal pricing if you accept that. You're spending like $200 on memory, and then you're spending where you would normally spend like $3 on like a VRM part, it's like 15 now, and that sort of stuff. Like it's kind of insane.
Yeah, it is
Yes, you
ridiculous.
don't, and Doughboy, you don't need premium parts for any of this. You don't. You really don't. This is a stripped down piece, but they're going to have their triple fan model of everything for some reason. They just are. This is what they do. And some people legitimately will just look at the shelf and see, oh, this is the better one, and they'll spend more money on a worse card, and they want that one. It's weird, but companies don't. Companies exist to sell a product, not to necessarily do the logical thing.
I mean, I'm hoping we still see, at least here in the US, once the launch happens, I'm hoping that we at least see some cards that are below $300, because as of right now, there is no the under $300 graphics market just doesn't exist.
I really hope this card exists to $200, because at least some people could buy it and play games at 1080p on it. They can put together a budget system. Nathan, I don't think they really thought through the i5 and i3 owners from back in the day. I really think this is just a rebuilt laptop part that they're repurposing because the market is insane and they need something cheaper.
Yeah, I think that's more likely the case. When you consider that, laptops don't need encoding because they're paired with CPUs that have IGPs for that. They definitely designed that with the mobile space in mind. But that also worries me, though, because that means that they, from the beginning of RDNA 2, they never intended to have a GPU in this space, unless maybe the 6600 XT GPU was meant to be priced lower, and you can get really down the far down the rabbit hole with that. But it's really
I got some really interesting messages after I did the 6600 XT video, and people were telling me that AMD must be making, I think, what's the MSRP on that card again, Donnie?
$380.
Yeah, people were telling me that AMD's, or all the AIBs spend about $180 to make it, which is just not true. The memory is going to cost about that much. Like, that's just the world that we're in. If you look at the parts that are available that are
at least
not,
that was the case when it launched.
yes,
I haven't.
It might have been better now. Honestly, I don't know. I keep hearing that supply chain issues are getting better, but I don't know what getting better is. I don't know if that means 2018, 2019 levels, or if that just means not really, really bad. So yeah, people were like, this card should be this price, and this is important to understand for everybody watching. So you guys can sit here and say the 580 was $200, and I'm not buying something that's not better than a 580 for $200. And I completely understand that context, but the cost of putting these things out there have also gone up. Not to the point where, a 6600 XT should be $750 at, your retail store. I mean, how much have you seen them at Micro Center for, Donnie? Like $600, $550?
Sorry? Which GPU?
The 6600 XT.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna spend about
they're marked
when
up.
they're in stock.
They're marked up there. They are. So in this kind of situation, I mean, you should just not buy a GPU. If you can't afford one at the prices that they're selling them at, then you should just not buy one. And that's kind of where we're at. There's some egregious things that are happening, like with the 3090 Ti and the 12 gig 3080. But I mean, some of these parts there's not a huge markup being made. Yeah, 500 for the 6600 XT. Yeah, I've seen them up to 550 for some like triple fan models or what have you.
Well, it seems like now the 6600 non-XT is regularly when there's some overlap in pricing between those two. I've noticed at retail, but it's not. It is not rare to see it priced at above 500 for a 6600.
Aldous said that ASML just had a fire at their Berlin factory, and the wafer situation could get a whole lot worse if their production stumbles because TSMC won't have raw materials. I don't know about that, Nathan. I think the 6700 XT is probably one of the better options, especially when you could have gotten one for like $700. I want to say what, like 6 months, like 3 months ago, Donnie?
I regularly seen them, especially the reference one, sold on eBay for around 750 a few months ago. I think
they're getting closer to like $900 to $1,000 now. $900 to $1,000, which is just not good. It's not good.
But at around 700, the 6700 XT is the best overall.
It's also important though for everybody to understand who's saying I bought a 580 and I spent $200 on it. You could sell your 580 today for like $200.
In fact, just as an example, and this is still possible, if you are a current owner of an RX 5700 or 5700 XT, you could easily sell or trade one of those for a 6700 XT at no cost to you. You might even be able to convince somebody to give you some money. Like you get a free upgrade because that's just the market we live in right now. The 6700 XT is not extreme at
mining.
Bitcoin mining. Not Bitcoin, but
Ethereum.
Ethereum.
Well, it's important to understand too. A lot of people expected this to get better around now because Ethereum was supposed to push to proof of stake instead of proof of work, but that didn't happen. And it was originally supposed to happen, I think, last fall, but they pushed it back to January, and then they pushed it again to an indefinite period. So it seems like it's not going to get better.
Yeah, I bought my RX 580 8 gig for $200 in September 2020. Legendary purchase.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, like I know people who sold their 2060s for like $600. So we can sit here and say these prices are insane, but and a lot of people did this, they sold their cards to miners and then bought an inflated cost of a new card, and they ended up spending like $200. So, I mean, how much would you have gotten for an RX 580 before the mining boom? Maybe like $90, $75, maybe $100. You know, if you're dealing with some cost increases here, it's not that bad, depending on the card. If you had a 2080, you could have also sold your 2080 and got something that was, slightly more expensive, but you would have gotten a better card.
Yeah, I mean,
so I don't know if the Ethereum bubble will pop. I think it's more that Ethereum will stop using GPUs, and you'll see the proof of work end. And when proof of work ends, then miners will switch to some other coins, but they really can't sustain the amount of cards that are out there. The markets will just implode. So then people will start offloading cards. Yeah. Wow, John. I bought a 3070 and I sold mine for about $900 to buy my 6800 XT. So again, that's kind of where we're at.
So I had a Founders Edition 2070 Super that I purchased for retail. I think it was $500 at Best Buy.
Mm-hmm.
That I sold for, I want to say, $450 right around the launch of the 3060 Ti, and bought a 3060 Ti Founders Edition. I had that for a few months, and I managed to sell that for, I think, $900, which I used to buy a 3070 for $800 at Micro Center when I found one. And then I used that for a while and sold the 3070 for $1,300 and bought a 6800 XT for that much.
So
The Black Edition. So you can be mad at me because I scalped GPUs, but technically I never bought any of those with the intention to sell them. I just sold them because there was demand for it at that price. And I could move to a different GPU.
I was gonna say to Doughboy about the buy a console. You couldn't really do that 6 months ago either. I mean, you can buy a Series S.
You can buy a Series S now. They're readily
It's still hard to get it. It's still hard to get an Xbox Series X and to get a PS5. Yeah, the people who were like, "Oh, I'll just get a console." It's like, well, good luck trying to find a scalp PS5 then. Yeah, it's again the way I looked at it was I'm selling these things and I'm going to get burned on the other end. So I don't really care that I'm selling it for an inflated value because I have to buy it for an inflated value.
But speaking of
good on you, Red Claw, if you was able to get one. I know a ton of people that could not get one.
Yeah. I mean, most of the people that I know that wanted one eventually got one, but it took them a while.
I don't really think the crypto thing being banned is going to be the answer. I mean, how many things are not crypto related that have gone up exponentially since the pandemic? Have you guys seen the cost of housing?
Everything is pretty ridiculous right now.
Like, I mean, have you guys tried to buy lumber, raw materials, meat? All this stuff is insane.
I'm a regular purchaser of meat. Yes.
Yeah, even if you want to buy like ASRock Phantom Gaming banners to just put on your chair for some reason.
Hey, that was a gift, and it's a towel.
Oh, fancy. Yeah. What do you think the limiting factor is for PS5 supply? Memory. Memory was the issue, Nick. And that's another reason why GDDR6 and graphics card costs were so high, because each PS5 was taking 16 gigs of memory. I was doing some napkin math on this before. The Series X uses 16 gigs of memory, right? And then the PS5 uses 16 gigs of memory. I know Microsoft does some sort of weird thing where they use other slower memory for the system memory or something. And then with the Series S, they use less RAM. But regardless, the point is there's hundreds of millions of gigs of RAM that were being sold to the console market, which was also selling in record numbers. Yeah. Record numbers, like compared to any other console launch ever. So it's really important to understand that we're not in a normal market either. We also have a lot of people who are our age and older than us who are gamers who are buying hardware, and then their kids, and in some cases their grandchildren. You have an exponentially large amount of people buying consoles than say they were in the 90s, the 80s, even 5-10 years ago. There's a lot of Zoomers that are buying hardware.
Yeah. Older millennials and Gen Xers who PC game are horrified by the current market, and then the younger millennials and Gen Zoomers, Zennials.
I like Zoomers.
They seem to just be willing to spend the money on the things and aren't really that upset.
Well, this is important to understand too. Those people are not as social in general as the sort of Gen Xers. This is not like an insult or anything, but the Gen Xers would say things like, I go out to the bar with my friends. I could go do this. I'm going to go spend it on, and I even see it in the chat, guys saying stuff like, I go buy a rifle. I go buy this. I go out with my friends. I go on a trip. A lot of the people younger than us are very much homebodies. So them spending $2,000 on a graphics card isn't that insane when, they don't really spend a lot of money in general.
I mean, yeah, people spend a large part of the amount of money they have on basically entertaining themselves, one way or the other. And when you have people who, like someone was saying in the chat, are just stuck at home, and that's the pandemic. Everyone's stuck at home, but a lot of the younger generation, like you explained, are homebodies. They don't really socialize in those same ways. They don't go to bars. I mean, first of all, they're not old enough to drink, but even when they are, they really don't. So playing games, streaming, playing multiplayer games with their friends, that is their social environment.
It's really important to understand too.
That goes for me too. I don't go to the bar anymore either.
We weren't. It wasn't like cool to be a nerd when we were growing up. Now it's cool to have a RGB light up system that you play Call of Duty and you stream to your friends. You know, this was not cool when we were growing up. So this is a much more normalized activity, I suppose. So the market forces on it are very different.
Did you have any other topics you wanted to get into? I pretty much covered everything.
I mean, there was the ramp thing from AMD, I suppose, and there was the Intel announcements for their 12th gen parts, but I feel like we got to some much more interesting conversations.
Yeah, AMD, do you have the
it's up right now.
So AMD ramp is is effectively a competitor to Intel's XMP technology. As of right now, AMD doesn't. If you have a Ryzen processor, you're using DOCP or XMP profiles on the on your memory. These are probably tuned for Intel. I've seen memory kits that are specifically made for Ryzen, but they're still called XMP profiles.
And they work fine. Like, honestly, in all of the different motherboards and systems I've used, XMP just works for Ryzen.
Yeah. So I do wonder what the problem AMD is trying to solve here when with Ryzen 3000 on up, they've done a very good job of supporting a wide variety of memory. I've never had a kit that I've plugged into one of those have a problem getting to XMP profile. So, I mean, I think this is mostly a marketing thing, just so they can have their logo and brand stamped on the back of the memory too. I mean, I've already seen kits with Ryzen logos on there, so a Ryzen edition memory. So again, I don't really know what the point of this is, aside from marketing. But I guess we'll have to see if they actually get people to it, like memory manufacturers to adopt it. I think this is. Sorry, let me finish.
Go ahead.
This is probably the best shot they've ever had of getting something like this adopted by memory manufacturers, since Ryzen does have so much brand recognition and is kind of a force behind a lot of PC DIY sales. I think I remember you said something about DDR5 having up to 5 memory profiles.
I think I remember hearing something about this a long time ago. I could be totally off base, but I think I remember one of the things with DDR5 was it had more profiles you could program into it out of the box. I have yet to use I'm sorry. I've yet to use DDR5. I was waiting on a kit for a long time, and I have one coming on Tuesday. I was supposed to have a bunch of Alder Lake content, but that just didn't happen because I could not get memory. I had some companies that I won't name promise some stuff, and then they just sort of stopped replying.
I'm going to butcher your name, but I'm going to try anyway. Ioannis? Still, you need to buy the kit with exactly the number of sticks you need for Ryzen. Can't mix and match in practice. I've actually bought I had a kit of a 16 gig kit that's 2x 8GB of DDR4 3600 G-Skill. I think it was Trident Z Carbon. Is that what they called it? And I bought another kit of the same RAM, and that worked fine. But I was even at the XMP profile, even though they were using different actual memory ICs. I checked, and there were different manufacturers. I don't remember which ones, but I never had any issues with that kit.
Yeah, I mean, Greg, that's a good point, because the more like fine tuning that people do with memory, this might just do it out of the box, or it might get closer. That's true. That could be it. I think it's kind of interesting. I mean, DDR5 might be a whole different animal, the way that their memory subsystem works, so they might need something like this. Yeah, I mean, would you guys actually be interested in emulator performance on CPUs? That's one of the things I was kind of tossing around to do as a video.
That could be interesting.
There was a question I saw earlier a second ago.
I haven't run PCS3, the PS3 emulator, but I have messed a lot with the Switch emulator and which is called Yuzu, and Simo, which is the Wii U emulator, and those run really well, especially on what you call it, especially on Ryzen 5000. Like, I haven't had any issues with them.
Gamers used to be geeks, now they're jocks. I mean, to a certain degree, some of the FPS guys totally do act in that sort of way. I mean, it's interesting because it's very socially sort of accepted. And me and Donnie are in our early 30s. Whoever asked that earlier.
I just turned 30 in October.
Somebody asked about Intel's ARC lineup. Honestly, I don't know a whole lot about it, Donnie. Do you have any thoughts on it? GPU stuff I kind of don't zone into as much. I
had this article queued up from The Verge of all places, but since it didn't really matter. So the only thing Intel announced about ARC at CES was that they actually have GPUs headed to OEMs. So, I mean, that should mean that we're going to be seeing them rather soon, hopefully really soon. I don't know if they've released any other information in terms of actual SKUs or anything, because I haven't seen anything.
I mean, we should hope before the end of Q1.
We don't even know what these things will be named other than like the ARC branding. I'm hoping we know sooner rather than later. I'm also hoping they're going to be good. From what I've heard rumor-wise, the top SKU should be close to a 3070 in performance, which isn't great, but I mean, if it's priced well, who cares? 3070 performance is good, you know. So while they might not have a Halo product on their hands, having anything is nice at this point. The thing I'm probably more interested from Intel is XESS, their competitor to DLSS, which they claim will be basically universal and work on non-Intel GPUs. They're probably going to have to be modern. I don't know if we have an actual list of like cards they're expecting to be supported, but there will be a variant that is specifically for. Let's see. Click this. That's specifically for Intel ARC, and that will perform apparently slightly better. But that's the only thing I got from Intel.
I mean, we got some.
So hold on. The reason why people are interested in XESS over FSR is because FSR uses basically spatial upsampling, whereas DLSS is an AI-based technique that uses temporal upscaling, and the quality in action is better. There are numerous game engines that use temporal upsampling as well, and those also look better than FSR in a lot of situations. FSR looks best when you're running at 4K is your native resolution, and you are running at FSR ultra quality. But in other situations, the loss in quality is more noticeable, at least to my eye, and from what I've seen other reviewers say, at least. FSR is a great technology. I like it, but it's not the real competitor to DLSS that we need. So I am looking forward to XESS because it is universal. It could be bad. I don't know, but I'm interested.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the last thing I wanted to touch up on was just the pricing for the Alder Lake stuff.
Okay, let's get that going.
So yeah, I mean, I don't like that they don't have their E-cores on everything below the K part. I think that was a real missed opportunity, but The 12400 being like $200 and 167 for the F part, which I'm just gonna say this, guys. Oh, did I lose you guys? Okay.
You're still here.
The F part generally are not that much cheaper. You generally pay the same amount. I paid about retail for I paid the same for the 11400 that the F was going for. So there's always like this Intel pricing is cheaper, but supply is never there, so they end up priced the same as the non-F version. So I would expect that thing to sit at around $200. But at $200, this would be a very compelling part, especially for gamers.
Doughboy. I know you weren't necessarily asking, but I'm going to offer advice anyway. If I were you, I would upgrade to a 5800X or something else from the Ryzen 5000 lineup if you really want a CPU swap. I mean, Alder Lake is great, don't get me wrong. I think the 12700K is a great part. But if you've already got a motherboard compatible with, 5000 series, it's a no-brainer.
I mean, especially if you don't have a super beefy GPU and can't find one. That's another thing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you don't have to buy new RAM when buying Alder Lake because you can get a DDR4 motherboard. But I mean, I think the simplest upgrade makes the most sense. I don't think Alder Lake is so much better than the 5000 series that it's like absolutely necessary to go that way. And you can always decide what you want to do later on when there are other new CPUs out.
Without actually using Alder Lake yet, I can't, as a CPU reviewer, guy who does benchmark videos, give you a concrete answer. But I would agree with Donnie's argument, at least theoretically. I think looking at reviews and the data that we all have access to, it seems compelling. I mean, the thing that I'd really like to look into is the sort of esports performance that I did before with the 5000 series. I think that's sort of a thing that most reviewers don't do, partially because it takes way too long and I'm a glutton for punishment. I think you really see the CPU being able to stretch its legs when you have a relatively powerful GPU and 1080p performance when you're trying to hit like that 360 hertz number. But again, a lot of people have a 1080p 144 hertz monitor, so it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah. Honestly, I think at this point, as far as CPUs go, everything on the market is a good option. It kind of just depends on your situation.
I mean, if everybody was out there being able to buy 6900 XTs and 3090s and 3080s, and they were just in the stores available, maybe that's a different conversation. But right now, you can't buy anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, Ionis, and I think, again, I'm pronouncing your name that way. I agree. I think I would agree. I mean, if we're just talking $20 to have the integrated GPU, why not?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably not going to be $20. It's probably going to be like $5, $3. It might even be more expensive to have the non-GPU version. It's really weird. If you guys have ever tried to buy one, like these tables and these slide decks that people always put out because it's Intel's official pricing, when you actually try to buy these parts out in the wild, you don't see them for those numbers.
Well, I think you don't. The obvious thing here is that's not those parts aren't made for PC DIY. They might sell them in that space and at some volume, but the whole point those exist is so OEMs that need to cut as much cost as possible have as many options as possible from Intel.
That's true. That they probably go on a lot of gaming PC, budget gaming PC things that cost about $1,000.
Right, because in that situation, why should the OEM pay for the IGP that it plans to pair with a graphics card anyway? And when you're talking, again, $20 isn't a big deal, but when you're talking thousands of systems, that adds up to a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really just can't get over the fact that they just cut the E-cores out of all of their non-K parts. Or they're everything below the 11600F KF. I'm sorry, the 12600 KF. I hate these numbers so much.
12600? You mean
12600.
you don't like the 12600K? Because I'm just gonna start calling it by those names now. I have a 4K 60 hertz monitor and clearly don't give a damn about esports, or for that matter, most online games, because my internet sucks. Donkey dick. I went a different direction because I had to.
I totally understand that. I like that. Totally makes sense. Again though, the thing that I've noticed personally is a lot of the people that I game with tend to like to play esports games, and they tend to ask questions about their CPU and GPU. And they tend to just not be served at all by, or very lightly by, a lot of the reviewers and benchmarkers and sort of tech tubers and review outlets on websites. I think Hardware Unboxed does the best job of trying to cater to that audience, but they do like everything. The numbering is almost bad as USB numbering. Yeah.
Or you mentioned USB, HDMI. What about Wi-Fi? Wi-Fi 6 certified release 2.
The more I think about it, the AMD 5800X 3D doesn't sound that bad.
No.
It doesn't sound that bad.
Come on, Wi-Fi. They just literally fixed the naming by, Wi-Fi 5, 6, 7, whatever you want. And then they're like, but what we can do is fuck shit up.
So, Janos, our main systems, me and Donnie have the same GPU, believe it or not. We have a reference 6800 XT Midnight Black. Do you have the Midnight Black too?
Yes.
Okay. I have a 5800X, and I have 32 gigs of G-Skill at 3600 megahertz. I think it's CL16. That paid quite a decent amount for that memory. With a Noctua, what is it? The 12, the one with the Starox fans. I'm trying to remember the name of the cooler. I think Noctua would not be happy.
Name of the cooler, which is it?
The 120 millimeter that uses the Starox fans. The one that's supposed to be like the D15 but smaller.
A12S.
The A12S and a lot of
nope, I got that wrong. U12A, right?
The U12A. That's it. It's the U12A. A lot of NVMe storage in a MSI X570 godlike. I'm not going to talk about the storage because I don't want to be here for a long time.
Yeah, I'm not going to list my storage specs either, but I have a Ryzen 9 5900X, an ASRock X570 Tai Chi Razer Edition.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, the GPU you mentioned before. Mm-hmm. RAM is 32 gigs of Team Group T-Force Extreme RGB Max something. That's 3600 CL 3600 CL 14. Yeah, I know I sound like a retard, but
the memory that I have is G-Skill Neo something, Trident Neo something, and I turn the RGBs off.
Trident Z Neo, that's the one that I was thinking about before.
They're really good.
Yeah, Trident Z Neo is nice. As far as the cooler, I think it's a Deep Cool Captain 360 EX. No, not Captain. It's Castle. Deep Cool Castle 360.
They sent me one of their 280s that I use in my test bench now. It's a great cooler. Does the 5800X run hot? Yes, it does. Earlier in the stream, you probably wasn't here for it. I mentioned that I run it in with PBO on, but the power is sort of pulled back. If you guys check the channel, I did a video where I talked about tuning with Ryzen Master for these CPUs. I use the one that I talked about for the 5800X. That's the sort of in between performance and temps. But yeah, I'm also still using Windows 10. I think Donnie was switched to 11 or is considering doing it.
I'm on 11 now.
Okay.
My main system runs 11, my laptop, but my home theater PC and my server are still on 10. I don't plan to upgrade the Plex server. There's no reason for that. Some people use 11. I don't mind it. I like it. There are some issues, but it runs well, and I don't know. I like new UI, so it's like, well, everyone else is complaining because like I have to learn a new thing. I enjoy doing that, so that's why I always upgrade whenever there's a new Windows.
Tweedle, I mentioned it, but it's the U12A from Noctua. I probably said the name wrong again.
Oh yeah, people are calling you a Noctua dealer because you're wearing their hoodie.
So
but you don't know their product names, so
right. So this is honestly how it happened, guys. They offered to send me a hoodie when I asked for fans because I'm doing a project where I test the cooling or my like case temperatures and stuff with Noctua fans to see sort of the before and after and noise levels. Yes, it's a tower cooler. It's a single tower cooler, and it has 2 of the Starox fans on either side. I personally, out of all of the Noctua products that I've used, this hoodie is probably one of the better ones. This is not a shot. This is just a really nice hoodie.
That's interesting because they make some pretty good coolers. So,
I mean, I feel like they made the hoodies first, and then the coolers were just kind of like.
Does the hoodie have any sort of cooling system? Does it keep you?
No, but there's like a big owl in the back. It's a little interesting. Yeah, it is an issue of pulling the heat out of the package area. The 5800X specifically is very heat dense because it's a single chiplet. But everyone hates brown. I know.
Did they send you the pants to match so that way?
Unfortunately, no.
It would come in handy for those days that you're feeling kind of right.
I'm surprised no one has made a joke about the couches in the back.
I don't know what there is to say.
I mean, they're just these are very, very not good looking chairs.
That's true.
The couch is like whatever.
I just feel bad for the homeless man that you stole them from.
Listen, they came with the apartment, all right, guys. I asked them to take them out. They said no.
So yeah, I don't really know what else to get into. I think we covered all the topics. We will take any questions the chat has. I'll start off a question. Alex, what are you playing lately?
Escape from Tarkov and some RimWorld.
RimWorld. What is that again?
It's like a base building game.
Oh, okay. One of those things I don't play.
Yes.
I don't play a lot of things.
What are you playing, Donnie? Just out of curiosity, because I have no idea.
Right. Well, I also play Escape from Tarkov. I think we play together casually.
I mean, a couple of times,
Yeah, I've seen you.
It's not like we haven't played Halo when we were teenagers or anything. No.
I also just finished Halo Infinite a few weeks ago. The campaign, that is. I beat it on Legendary mode. I'm proud of myself. I think they said only 2% of gamers did that. What I'm confused about the achievement is, when it tells you that only 2% of gamers got that achievement, do they mean 2% of gamers who've actually played Halo, or just the entirety of people who play on Xbox? Because like that's
I think it's a percentage of everyone who has opened the game or played it at any length.
Well, that makes me feel good then.
Yeah, no, it just again, I'm gonna bring up the sweater one more time and then I'm gonna stop. It is really comfortable. That's honestly why I'm wearing it. It's really soft.
You know they don't sell the sweater, right?
They do actually. It's on Amazon.
Do they? Oh,
we should put a link in the description with our Amazon affiliate code, shouldn't we?
Just throw one in the chat.
I don't have our Amazon affiliate code.
Oh, well then. Just guys, do me a favor. There are links for the Amazon in the description. Just click on one of those and Google brown sweater.
Noctua sweater. It's in the Noctua store. Anyways, we have a question about Zen 4. So we think that it's going to be DDR5 only. I think it's going to be somewhat impressive. I don't think it's going to be mind-blowing like a lot of people might assume it's going to be. Anything past 15%, I'd be shocked. I think the IO options might be nice on it, but I don't know how much storage you guys need. That's kind of where we're at. Is I don't really know what the purpose of all of this IO is for anyone who doesn't want 40 SSDs and are constantly reading and writing to them at the same time. I think in total performance, Nick, I could be wildly off, but I'm just in the assumption that we're going to see about 15%.
Yeah. What I thought was interesting is that apparently that the heat spreader we kept seeing leaked that was like rendered is real. That's actually the heat spreader they're using. They are switching to an LGA package for AM5. That's pretty interesting that they decided to go LGA this time around. What do you think the reason for that is?
You know, I'm honestly not sure. I feel like they've gotten where they could with the PGA stuff, the pin grid array.
No, I thought you meant like the golf competition.
The golf tournament, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like they've pushed where they've gotten to, and it also is a way for them to push cost onto motherboard manufacturers, which is always nice.
Yeah, I would imagine packaging costs.
It's easier to get retention and that sort of stuff done too on an LGA system.
Yeah,
it's honestly it's a better system, despite the fact that it's not as nice for me to use. But maybe I'll stop bending CPU pins now, Donnie.
Or you might bend some on the motherboard, although I've never done that.
Which is worse. Honestly, it's way worse. It's way harder to fix that than it is a pin on a CPU. But go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I'd imagine that the driving reason behind this has to be packaging costs, right? It must be cheaper to produce a CPU that doesn't have all those gold pins on it. I mean, it also obviously they're less fragile. Then on the user end side of things, you're not going to get so many people, mistakenly bending the pins on their CPU. If they damage their motherboard, that's something they have to take up with their motherboard manufacturer, right?
It's also harder to bend the pins on a motherboard. You're less likely to have the issue. It's harder to fix it. I've fixed bent pins many times with a razor blade. It's not as difficult as you guys would think. Although don't do it unless you have to.
Well, yeah, don't take out your currently working CPU and bend the pins and then try to fix them.
Or like throw it in the wall and just see what happens. Like don't do that. I don't know where you've heard the number to be 20 to 30 to 40%. I also usually take numbers like that with a grain of salt because I assume they're cherry pick numbers. They're not real world numbers. I'm just kind of skeptical in general about everything. It helps me to be less angry when things come out. So you don't see videos where I'm doing this in the thumbnail and there's stuff on fire in the background. Although people seem to like that. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should say Zen is going to be free and then be really angry when it's, I don't know. I actually saw the LGA 1700 IO video in my timeline, and I wanted to watch it. I really like level 1 tech stuff.
Any one of you ever used a Pentium 100 megahertz?
I have not.
No.
Pentium 4 was the first Intel chip I ever used. Before that, I think I had an AMD K6 in my family's old computer when I was growing up.
My first PC that I can remember the specs for had an AMD Duroron. So, yeah, I don't think I've ever used, or at least I didn't know I was using an Intel Pentium 100 megahertz.
Australian friend. We have an Australian friend?
Where do you see this question?
Someone said it was hoping our Australian friend would show up.
Australian friend? I think they mean Jim. Jim's actually not Australian. Yeah, he's Scottish, but his accent, I guess, is a little weird because he lives in Sweden.
Zen 4 with 25% IPC at 5 gigahertz and the DDR5 performance and a sick amount of cache to sort out the latency. I mean, I hope it's groundbreaking, honestly. I also wonder, though, what the price tag on that is going to be. And seeing how uncomfortable people are with the graphics card market, I really wonder what the availability and the costs are going to be on those CPUs and those motherboards. I mean, we know what DDR5 is priced at now, and it's not comfortable. I would just be prepared to hunker down if I were most people. I could be totally wrong, though. Like, these could be absolutely fantastic and blow everything we know out of the water. But, I'm just sort of being pretty skeptical after everything I've seen the past couple years. I think there's a lot of room for AMD to improve with, the new socket and some of the moves that they're making. And I feel like there's a lot of ground that they could cover, but I don't know. Adding a boatload of cache isn't the same as a standard 15% FPS. RAM expense is reduced due to cache misreduction, which is why we say 15% increase. Min FPS. Yeah, J-Star. So when I talk about FPS in terms of these, like when I think of a gaming CPU, I don't think of something that is going to be amazing for Tomb Raider. I think of something that is going to be amazing for a really single-threaded game. Something like Counter-Strike, something like a multiplayer shooter, something like Overwatch. Look at the video that I did on the multiplayer games, and that's what I think of as CPU demanding games, or something like, say, StarCraft, or the sort of the simulator games, the strategy games. That's what I'm talking about.
So, we got a question that was, I think it was first dedicated GPU you ever used. So I'd say used as because I've played on other people's computers probably before, but the first dedicated graphics card I've ever owned was this thing. The ATI Diamond Stealth S60 featuring Radeon 7000. Yeah, it wasn't very good. It wasn't, but I do recall playing Counter-Strike 1.6 on it. So with my AMD Duroron and that graphics card.
My first graphics card, it's actually kind of disappointing. It's something Donnie recommended because the integrated video on my old Pentium 4 system was just not handling Windows 7. It's a Radeon 5450, a Radeon HD 5450. And soon after that, I got a 6770. So that's sort of my first thing.
So as you can see, Alex is a little bit newer to this than I am.
Yes.
Even though we're the same age.
Well, Gunny, to sort of make this clear. When I think of games like Metro, I think this is a GPU bottleneck game. And, if I'm doing a CPU review, I'm going to tell you, wow, a 3600 is the same as literally everything else here. And a 2600 is only slightly slower. So that's kind of the thing here. You see Hardware Unboxed do this sometimes with them testing, I think it's Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's like, yeah, I mean, the frame rate is going to be the same because this is a GPU but demanding game. And I guess to answer Doughboy's question, why would you want FPS so high? I mean, Donnie, do you want to talk about that? Because I feel like we can both kind of answer this question.
Well, I mean, there's a variety of reasons. I mean, for the competitive space, obviously, more FPS means lower latency. So that can help a lot. But then there's also, we tend to think of quality in gaming as like spatial resolution, meaning the actual resolution, like 1080p, 4K, whatever. And those are important. But then there's the temporal resolution aspect, which is basically the clarity of the image in motion. And the higher the frame rate, the more clear and crisp things are going to be while in motion. And so that's just one of the reasons why you'd want as much FPS as you can possibly get. I'm not saying that you people playing at 60 FPS or 120 FPS or whatever have you are not doing it right. Like you're having a terrible experience. I play games at those too. But I do think we are moving towards the expected frame rate that you expect when you're gaming. I said that twice. Is higher. I think we're already seeing that with the way so many monitors and TVs now support at least 120 hertz. Even the consoles support 120 hertz, which was unheard of not long ago. So I do think.
Do you remember the 30 FPS is fine argument we used to hear all the time? And now apparently 60 isn't even good enough for them anymore. I can tell you right now, I know a lot of people have said you don't need 120, you don't need this, you don't need 360. I went from a 1440p 144 hertz monitor to a 1440p 240 hertz monitor, and I spent a lot of money for it. Like I did, but I also spent a lot of money for the graphics card that's in my system too. And I absolutely enjoy my monitor. I think it absolutely does add something to the experience. You notice things a little bit better. The smoothness does. I won't sit here and say it makes you so much better. It makes a guy who's bottom fragging into being average or great. But it does help somebody who's good feel a little bit more comfortable. I mean, that sounds miserable, Giannis. 10 FPS, that sounds hard.
Yeah, I don't know. Nick Lance said, whenever AMD starts mass producing TSMC 5 products for desktop and server, it could really start opening up some fab capacity for TSMC 7 and hopefully bring prices down on those parts. So ideally, that would be the situation. But unfortunately, that's not really how things work in practice all of the time. Because TSMC has some say in the matter, obviously. They're the ones who are producing these fabrications. If TSMC is seeing a lack of demand in one, on one fab space in terms of capacity, it's going to shut down those facilities or retool them for a more, for whatever node is more popular or they're seeing more profit from. So assume that as AMD stops using 7 nanometer for their entire portfolio like they are now, that TSMC is just going to have a lot of unused fab space that they're going to want to sell at bargain prices. I don't know. I mean, I think TSMC is going to optimize their production for what makes sense for them.
So somebody said that FPS is fluidity and not latency, and that some 120 hertz and 60 hertz monitors were better at competitive play than the first 144. Yes, when you see, this is I didn't really want to get into the sort of the nitty-gritty about this, but yes, latency is a different thing. But latency is in terms of the time that it takes your input to get there. But if you have a higher FPS with the same amount of latency, generally you will be getting lower you will be getting faster reaction times to what happens on the screen. As long as the crosstalk between the input that you make with your mouse and what happens on the screen that you see remains relatively similar, with the frame rate, it just lowers it. Yeah, the other thing we saw. Oh, okay. I guess with different strokes, you don't really play. Yeah, I mean, people who play AAA games really don't need the fastest, most powerful CPU if they're really graphics bound games. You need something that's, not 5 years old. You need something that's respectable depending on what kind of frame rate you're trying to hit.
Right. Trying to play God of War, the newly launched PC version, on an FX 8150 is probably not going to be a good time.
But I mean, if you're running it on like a 3600 or hell, probably even like a 2700, it's probably going to be fine.
I mean, yeah, I'd imagine any relatively modern CPU is going to handle it.
Janos, mostly for online multiplayer games. Single player, it's nice to get the higher frame rate, but I usually pick the fidelity over the frame rate if my card can't push both. If I'm playing something like, I guess Cyberpunk would be a good example. I'll play at 60 to 80 and crank up the settings and be happy. So it kind of depends on what you're trying to do. Although I do notice in some of the more taxing situations, the higher frame rate does kind of help me make more twitchy shots. So it kind of depends on exactly what you're trying to look for. AMD is selling everything they can. I suspect they'll continue to manufacture more stuff that's on the back burner for N7. I mean, as long as you have a situation where the market is demanding more than you can produce, you should open up back channels. I think that NVIDIA selling the 2060 12 gig, as long as it wasn't a 12 gig and maybe wasn't priced so high, would have been a good thing. If they could have priced it at a slightly lower market price, that would be good. I find it shocking that they decided to release the same card with the most expensive part, deciding to double it and making this thing cost more than it should. Yeah, Janos, more opportunity for the engine to update the input. Yeah, that's you have more room. It gives you a little bit quicker time to notice things, and you're getting more information on the screen. Yeah, AD, I think most of us, maybe I shouldn't say most of us. I think a lot of us would probably figure that they're going to use 7 nanometer for the IO die like they did before.
Gunny, I've played God of War, and I'd say as a PC port, it's fairly good. It doesn't run as well on Radeon hardware as it does on NVIDIA from the benchmarks I've seen. I was running it on a 6700 XT on my with my TV, which is a 4K TV, and I was struggling to keep 60 FPS. Even though I even tried it with FSR Ultra quality. So, and from what I could see, the 6700 XT performs even worse than a 3060 Ti in that game. So, I'd say it's a decent PC game in terms of port quality, but not a great one. Could be better.
I feel like this is a game that might get updated later and be a lot better in a few months.
Maybe.
Eton said, asked this earlier, but it was buried. Do you think Intel's entry into the graphics market will make much of a difference, given they're using TSMC rather than their own fabs? I don't think it's going to make a huge impact. I don't think this is the Hail Mary that a lot of people think it is. I don't know about you. I think this is good for the market in the long term. I think that Intel being a player in graphics means that there's 3 competitors to it. I think it's good in that way. Maybe they'll try to price their cards lower, but the problem is if they price their cards lower, they'll still just go out of stock quicker. Shy, your answer is as good as mine about this. It always seems to happen that even though these things use AMD hardware, they perform better on NVIDIA.
I mean, couldn't tell you. I mean, it seems like it's an NVIDIA sponsored title, at least in some form or another. It does have DLSS, but it also has FSR. But NVIDIA was also passing around codes to reviewers, from my understanding, for performance reviews. AMD is not doing that. So clearly, NVIDIA knows they look better in that game. Why is beyond me. I couldn't tell you. Trying to remember what I was going to talk about before. To chime in on as far like the Intel thing. Intel coming into the market is not going to change pricing, not right now. I know we all want to believe that this is a competition problem, but it's really not. This is the most competitive AMD has been with Intel in such a long with NVIDIA in terms of having graphics cards in the high end and stuff in a long time with the 6000 series, and yet pricing is the worst it's ever been. It's not. They're not related. Maybe when things normalize, and the pandemic and everything, all of the the things that drove prices up to the way they are no longer a factor. Maybe Intel being a third GPU manufacturer will help with competition and therefore pricing. But I think it's going to be a while before we see that, because as of right now, the world we live in is it's a very dark and miserable one.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good way of putting it.
Your cam has frozen. I don't know if you know that.
My camera might have died. Yep, looks like it died. So Doughboy asked the question about the future of the PC market and pricing and availability. I guess I should just stop my camera then. Yeah, I don't see it getting a whole lot better anytime really soon. I was very hopeful last year, and I was very wrong on that. There were sort of ebbs and flows where it seemed like it was getting better, but I don't know. I think that it's I think you might see points where you will see it getting slightly better and then things getting worse. So I don't think it's going to go back to normal anytime soon.
Ioannis, we are all going to be treated just like high-end audiophiles are, gouged. See, this is the difference. High-end audiophiles are very willing to pay very high prices for products that are only slightly better than one that's much cheaper. Like they willingly do that, even though there is an alternative. Like there are headphones for everybody. Like and the difference between $1,000 set of headphones and ones that are like a couple $100 is not a lot in a lot of cases. I'm being overly broad here, but like for the most part, there are huge diminishing returns with high-end audio equipment.
And they will tell you that. Those people will tell you that, and they won't, lie about it.
But right now, it's not like if we just lived in a world where graphics cards at the very high end were very expensive, but you were paying a whole lot of money for 10% more performance, but the one where you're getting 90% of the performance is, a lot cheaper, that'd be fine. They're being premium products for people who want to spend premium prices. It's not a big deal. But the fact of the matter right now is there are no budget products. There are cheaper graphics cards than the 3090, but there's nothing that is cheap. There's nothing that is a great value, because the demand is so high for everything, and supply just isn't meeting it, and various other factors.
Yeah, Giannis, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. Me and Donnie needed better cards to have for, testing and benchmarking purposes.
I mean, I bought the 6800 XT because nobody was willing to send me one for a review or anything like it. And, as somebody who does benchmarking and testing and stuff like that, not as much as I should be, but I do these things, it made sense to buy it.
A part of the reason why I went with AMD, by the way, is the fact that it's better at 1080p. And since I review CPUs, I figured 1080p was something that I probably should be benchmarking.
I did it because I always said once AMD has something that's as good or better than the NVIDIA, thing, then I buy their version. And the 6800 XT is as good, if not better, than the 3080. It's got more VRAM. It's not as good at ray tracing, but I don't do a lot of that anyway. I don't really like it. The best thing I've seen out of ray tracing in examples are usually in reflections, but it's not worth the performance penalty.
If you have so with lighting, I've noticed if you have sort of really good, I think it was Cyberpunk. I think you talked about this actually. Was it lighting or was it reflections where if they're baked well enough, it's fine and you can't really tell a huge difference?
The reflections in Cyberpunk are very good when ray traced, but they're also great. The rasterized versions are also really great when you're playing at ultra, and it runs better. So while they're still better with ray trace, it's not worth the performance impact. Lighting is a little bit of a mixed bag.
I guess it's harder to bake lighting.
In Cyberpunk, the ray trace lighting looks pretty good, but it's not so much different that it's worth the performance impact.
Yeah. Worldtown said that he thinks that ARC is aiming for OEM laptops, and he doesn't think they care a whole lot for OEMs or for DIY. DIY is not as huge of a basket as a lot of people think it is.
The thing about DIY is the main reason why these companies will release products to PC or DIY is the trickle down effect that it has on your overall sales. Because even if you're not selling a lot in the PC or DIY space, if people know about it there and they're talking about it, then it's more likely that an OEM will use that GPU that everyone's talking about in the DIY space in their pre-builds, if the pricing makes sense for them, obviously. So yeah, I think it's probably likely that you're not going to see a ton of cards in the DIY space from Intel, but I'd imagine they probably have to release some at some point.
I mean, I hope they release a decent amount of cards in the DIY space. It might have some small effect on pricing, maybe for a few weeks or something. It might not be. It's not. It's not. I don't feel like it's going to be the savior that a lot of people assume it's going to be, but I think it could be beneficial for a little. Yeah, there's definitely the halo effect, Eton.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, are there any more questions? Because I think we're getting pretty close to the end.
Yeah, I mean, if there's no other questions, I think we're probably going to end it here. We're about 2 hours in, roughly.
Just if you want to ask any more questions, give us a $50 super chat, and I'll do a hot tub stream. No.
Any thoughts on VR? I don't know too much about the PSVR 2. I'm glad that that they are releasing an update to the PSVR, because a lot of people's first experience with VR is the PSVR. I guess because it's a little bit more mainstream. But as far as VR as total goes, I have a Quest 2. That was the first VR headset I decided to buy. Although I did use the what was the other one? The first HTC, the HTC Vive. And when I first used the HTC Vive, I thought it was cool, but to me, it felt mostly like a gimmick, like I was just playing tech demos. The Quest 2 and like newer VR games that you can run on it and on your PC, streaming with it and everything, there are some really good PC games, or I mean VR games, I should say, that are worthwhile experiences, I would say. But I still think there's a lot of things that are a ways off for VR. I think the fact that the Quest 2 is so cheap is good for VR as a whole because it means wider adoption. But there are a whole other there's a wide variety of issues with the fact that Facebook and all of their shitty tactics and whatnot. But once you get past that, Quest 2 is a pretty good entry point into VR. But at the same time, I don't play my VR a lot. Like, as much as I want to say, like, yeah, this is the future, it's great. I don't look at it as a replacement to conventional gaming. I think it's just its own thing. And oddly enough, I think that what might make VR blow up even more isn't the gaming aspect so much as it is this whole metaverse shit that they're pushing now, which is, yeah, it's gaming, but it's more than that. It's social interaction, and it's essentially like if anybody remembers the old game Second Life, it's that but in VR. And people didn't play Second Life like it was a game; they played it like it was their life. Like, it's just what you do. I don't look forward to the future where everybody's sitting on their couch playing VR to go to the movies or interact with one another or do anything.
Go to a bar because you can't go anywhere.
Yeah. I think the more I think about the future being like something like the ship on Wall-E or Ready Player One, it's not looking good, guys. Like, there's already a lot of that with how much of what we do is like over the internet. Uber Eats has replaced like people going to restaurants for the most part. Especially with the pandemic, that has exacerbated the issue. Everyone just orders everything from Amazon, and if VR is how you socialize on top of all of that,
I wonder children who have spent a good amount or are going to spend a good amount of their formative years in this sort of normal that we're living in now, how they're going to be, how their social interactions are going to be. It's very questionable. It's worrying, but I guess on a question that's more lighthearted and less dark and dreary, do you think a 5950X 3D makes sense? Probably not, Eton. AMD doesn't seem to be that interested in it. And, I don't think they're lying when they say that the most efficient use of this is for gaming. We could see some of the possible use cases for it in other situations, but it seems like they're really aiming this product at gaming. And I know I'm not the only person that has said this. There really isn't a whole lot of benefit going from a 5800X to a 5950X or a 5900. If you're doing production, if you're a content creator in some way, if you do other stuff, yes, but as a primary gaming focused product, I guess it makes sense that they went with that product.
Yeah, I mean, and Robert Halleck's explanation, if it is true, and I have no reason to doubt it, makes sense. So I don't think there will be a 5950X 3D. Maybe we'll see 3D Vcache on higher core counts on Zen 4. But from my understanding, maybe we'll see higher core counts with a single CCD in Zen 4, though. Like, so, I don't know.
Oh, wow. Marcus, had a kind of a dark comment. Since the pandemic, with all the lockdowns, I drink in front of a mirror. Does that count as PR? I mean, we had a name for that before the pandemic, but I hope you get through it, my man. I know we're all getting through it. I know we're all kind of going through it at different levels.
I have legitimately heard of people having drinking parties over FaceTime. So, whatever works, whatever keeps you sane, man.
Yep. Rembrandt. I kind of commented on it earlier. I think it's going to be pretty good for AMD. Everything that they said, I mean, I don't think they're lying. I think it was like 15% performance per watt increases, 15 to 40% in depending on the workload. I think that all sounds fantastic, and I think they're probably going to be the better option than.
I legitimately don't know how he got in here. My door was closed. So, but
I feel like somebody in your house decided to get him out of wherever they were and just send him to you.
Probably.
I feel like this might be your cue to say that you've been on here long enough.
Your dog is licking its butt. That's what he does most of the time. If he was licking my butt, it'd be a problem. So I let him handle his own business.
I'm pretty sure that's not okay in every state in the union. Yeah, ADB, man. I appreciate you coming into the stream so late. Wow.
Have a good night, man. And with that, I think it's probably time we sign off. Thanks a lot for all the questions, guys, and the interaction. We appreciate you. We appreciate you coming to check us out. This is, of course, the first episode of Adore Tech, but we do plan on doing this hopefully at least once a week if we can find the time. And sometimes it won't be just me and Alex. Might have Kirk here or a guest. So yeah, have a good one, guys, and catch you in the next one.